I'm Evie Hawkins, and I am really glad that you're here with me today while I get to show you this week's project for Baby Lock's Love of Sewing Challenge. One of my favorite things to do with machine embroidery is to create continuous machine embroidered borders. And this machine has the most awesome little tool called the Connect feature, which allows you to perfectly align borders in the hoop. When I found out that I was going to be part of Baby Lock's Love of Sewing Challenge, I was really excited because I thought, this is my chance. I'm going to make something really fancy and beautiful. And what's prettier than a cut work border on a beautiful piece of Riley Blake fabric? Not much. As you can see, I had a lot of fun. So let's talk about what I used for my project and what you're going to need for yours, because I know you're going to make something beautiful too. One of the things that you need to find first and foremost is that wonderful little book that comes with your machine, the instruction and reference guide, because this book is so helpful. It's very step by step. You can look up anything you want to. It has a great glossary in it. So if you're like, how do I thread my machine, or what's this feature on my machine, you just look it up and it will tell you exactly the page that it's on. Now, also with this book are these little sheets of stickers. They look like crazy eights if you look at them this way. This is a very important tool because this is what will allow your machine to read the placement of your design, and this is what makes that Connect tool possible to use. So locate those and then choose your fabrics. And when you choose your fabrics, you're going to want something that is nice and sturdy, because this is a cut work design. That means satin stitching. This Riley Blake fabric is quilt weight cotton, but it is very finely woven, so it is able to support the satin stitching on this design that we're using today. And anything that you use really is going to look great, but I'll recommend this highly. Look how pretty that is. See all that pretty shiny gold foil print on it? It's just beautiful, and it made lovely projects, didn't it? So pick your fabrics, and then you're going to want some wash away stabilizer. So this stabilizer right here from Baby Lock is called Dissolve Away Mesh. You can use either the kind that has the self-adhesive with it or not, and I'll explain later the options of those two. Sometimes the self-adhesive is a plus and sometimes it isn't when working with satin stitching, but we'll talk about that later. Then you're also going to need thread that matches your fabric for the border, whatever color you want. I could have done white, but I wanted that cut work border to show up. So I chose this gold color right here. This is a rayon thread. I normally like to use a polyester thread when I'm working with satin stitching. However, rayon is nice too. It's very shiny. And you're going to want to fill some bobbins with the same thread. Whatever you use in the top, you're going to want to use in the bobbin. So if you've got gold on the top, it's gold in the bobbin, and it should be the same thread. I ran about 5 bobbins to start with, and I ended up making about 4 more before I finished the one big skirt, and it took about 5 bobbins to make the little skirt. So that gives you an idea of how much thread you're going to need. So let's gather all these things together, and then let me tell you a little bit about the hoops and other tools that we'll need. So let's gather our tools. You've already chosen your fabric, and if you're like me, whenever you're using a wash away stabilizer, or really anytime I'm making a project, I always pre-shrink my project fabric. But it's especially important that you do that when you're using a wash away stabilizer. So that's all taken care of. You've picked out the thread that you're going to use. You wound your bobbins. Now then, in the design files that you can download that come with this class, there are 2 designs. There is the 4x4 sized hoop border design and the 5x7 sized hoop border design. They also include the PDF templates for you to print out. I would highly recommend that you go ahead and print those 2 templates out and have them ready to go. Hunt in your sewing room for some good cutting tools. I like these scissors because they don't hurt my hand to use. You're going to need a good sharp pair of scissors, and you're also going to need something to trim that border design with. These little snips that I sell them on my website. You can also buy them locally at your dealer, but they have a serrated edge on one blade, and that makes them able to cut really close and very finely. It's a little curved, as you can see, and they cut all the way down to the point. This other little tool that I have, you can also find that at your local dealer. You see that little crook that it has there in the end? That is awesome for getting those jump threads or the tails on the back of the hoop and clipping them right off really close. Now then, you'll need to choose your hoops. The Baby Lock Destiny comes with some beautifully sized hoops, as you can see. The great big mama one and the medium sized one, and then you have the 6x10 as well as the 5x7. Now this hoop is the one that we're going to be using today, the 5x7, simply so that it won't take so long for me to show you how to go from one hooping to the other. And the design that I'm going to use is going to be the 4x4 design, so that I can easily show you the connect feature within that size hoop. So gather all of your supplies together, and then let's turn our machines on and get started. So now we're ready to hoop our fabric. You're going to want to hoop the wash-away stabilizer with the fabric on top of it. So you'll notice here that I have cut a piece of stabilizer for my bottom layer that's about 50% longer than what is going to fit in the hoop. This is so that I'll have room to hoop again when I move my hoop down to create that continuous border. When I was making the skirts, I cut my stabilizer as long as my piece of fabric. And you can do that too. If you find that wasteful, you of course can always just piece your pieces together as you go. So let's make sure that this fits in the hoop. It's very important that this bottom layer at least completely fit inside the hoop. My second layer, and this is just to help stabilize the stitches and to prevent pull on the fabric when the stitching is going on, because satin stitching is very stitch intense. So this piece can just simply go under the area that the embroidery design will stitch. Now I'll put my piece of fabric on top of it. Now my border design is going to be going along this edge, so I don't want that all the way over there, but I do want it to be close enough that I can get this in the hoop and still have room to work right here. So what would you say? That's about 1/4 of the space away? Maybe that's about right. So let's hoop these all together. Once you get it in place, take a look at that. Is that line pretty straight? Well, maybe not. Let me find my little hoop grid here and I'll check it out. Not very straight at all. I might straighten that out. Alright, so let's straighten that out a bit. That's not really important because you can move the design around in your Destiny to fit the crookedest placed fabric ever. However, I find it helpful to start with it as straight as I can get it, and you can see that it is straight there. Alright, let's tighten the hoop screw up nice and firm, and let's go put it in the machine and get started. The very first thing you need to do is load your USB stick. And it's a cute little thimble. That's where I keep all my embroidery designs. So when you download the designs from your computer, you will write them to a USB stick that you'll put in your machine. So we'll put it in right over here on the side. It's the top slot for the USB. Now then, I'm going to choose embroidery, and then I'm going to find King Trident's tool right there. See that? And click that. And here are my embroidery designs that are on my USB stick. So today I'm going to choose this one, the small border, and then I'm going to set it. There we are. We're about ready to go. Now I'll click embroidery, and now this design is ready to embroider. However, I want this to be a connecting design. So I'm going to go to edit, and there is the connect tool. It looks like a film strip almost, but it's 3 little boxes connected together right down here on the bottom right. So I'm going to touch that. Now you'll notice these things gray out, so don't worry about that. This is all set and ready to go. If you touch edit one more time, that screen goes away. Now because I want to see where I'm going to be able to place my border, my very first border, I'm going to hit the camera function and take a picture of what's in my hoop. Now this is pretty awesome. So we're going to tap that, and it will tell me that the frame is going to move so that it can scan what's in the hoop, and I'll click OK, and then she's going to get busy and scan. So what do we see here? You can see the design is sitting right in the center of that piece of fabric there. Well, that's because the design will load in the center position, but I want it to be closer to the edge, and I also want it to be up. Now I have two options. I can either put my stylus right on that and drag it to where I want it to go. That looks about right. Well, maybe I'll give myself more room. Okay, right about there. Or you can always hit the edit button and the move button and then use these tools to move it where you want it to go. But that looks good to me, so I'm going to call that done. Hit that to get back out, and now we're ready to start. So let's lower the presser foot and press go. This first stitch sequence is the outline or the cutting line with which you will know where to cut your fabric or to trim away the excess. And it stitches twice. That's to make it extra sturdy so that you don't have to worry about the fabric pulling away from the stitching while you're cutting it. So there, we've let it stitch. We're ready to take the hoop out of the machine and place it on a hard, flat surface so we can trim away the excess fabric along our cutting line. It's very important that when you take the hoop out of your machine and put it back in fact, whenever you're handling the hoop at all, that you always hold the hoop by the hoop and not the fabric in the hoop. That's to prevent accidentally dislodging the fabric. So you'll notice that I'm going to hold it by the hoop and not the fabric in the hoop. And go and carry it to my work table and set it on top. So let's go do that. The very first two cuts I'm going to make are through this top layer of fabric to each end. And I'm going to cut straight across. Don't angle it because you want to have some fabric on each end to work with when you're placing the next design. So I'll cut right straight across. And then I'm going to get my little trimming tools and cut as close to this stitching line as I can. You see how easy these little scissors make this job? I love these things. I can't live without them. So there, I've gotten real close, well, as close as I can see anyway. That looks pretty good. Now you're probably wondering, why did I use a wash away stabilizer that's not sticky? It would be a lot easier if my fabric stuck to it, right? And then I wouldn't be worried about it flopping around in the hoop while we're sewing. However, with a rayon thread and a satin stitch, sometimes that stickiness is a disaster waiting to happen. For some reason, the thread just wants to break more often. I was stitching on the wash away with the sticky with my first skirt, and I decided that it might be better if I just switched to the non-sticky, and I was right. It was much more helpful. However, if you are just beginning embroidery and you are just now learning how to do a cutwork border, you might want to start with sticky and a polyester thread, and that will do the trick, and that won't break nearly as badly as my rayon thread decided to do. That's just a little heads up there. So let's go back to the machine. So back in the machine, lower the presser foot, press go, and we'll stitch that narrow zigzag. Now this is a great opportunity to check your trimming work. For instance, if you see any little bits sticking out past the stitching line there, then you know that you need to take this hoop out of the machine and go to your work surface and trim those off. However, it looks like I did a really good job, so I'm not going to have to take my hoop out of the machine again. I'm just going to go straight on into the satin stitching. So we'll lower the presser foot again and press go again. This is the final satin stitch edge. So we're finished stitching. Now look what your screen is asking you. It says embroidery is finished. Okay to connect the next pattern? Yes, it is okay. So we'll click OK. And then it will tell us, do not remove the material from the frame. Press the OK key to select the next pattern. So we will press OK again. Now where did we find the border before? Right here, King Trident's tool. So we'll click that. It opens up our USB, and I'm going to use the same design. Set it. Now we're going to click the connect tool right there. Look what it did. It put the design exactly where it needs to go, connected end to end. You have a choice though. If you wanted to turn this design 90 degrees, you could click the little 90-degree button and it would go around the corner. Or if you wanted to move the design to this side of it or to this side of it, you could use these tools on the top. However, that's exactly where I want it to be because I'm making a continuous border, so I'm going to say OK. And at this point, the screen will tell you that the carriage of the embroidery unit will move. Keep your hands, etc., away from the carriage, and then we press OK. So it is showing me a picture of what is in my screen, and it is telling me to use both hands to affix the first embroidery positioning mark. Remember those little Crazy 8 stickers that we have? So this is what I need. And the biggest 0 is the one that goes on the top, just like it is there in the screen. So I am going to position this mark within these red lines. Now you are going to want to be looking at your hoop while you're doing this. Don't. Just watch the screen. And I found it a lot easier to do this by using tweezers on one end and then my finger and thumb on the other. So watch the screen while you come over here. You see, moving in. So you can't really be looking at your hoop. You really need to be looking at the screen. And I'm going to line up that little positioning mark. There it goes. I think that'll be good. And I'll smooth it down. Let's see how that looks. Looks like a bullseye to me, doesn't it to you? Alrighty, now we're going to press OK. And it's going to take another little picture there while it recognizes that positioning mark. Now it's going to tell me that I need to place another positioning mark. So I'll get my second positioning mark, placing it that end up again, and I'm going to place this over here on my hoop as I watch it on the screen, just like I did the first one. This mark is actually right on the stabilizer, but it sticks just as good. There's really good sticky to these little stickers, and they hold really well, and you can reuse them. Just stick them back on the paper that they came off of. Does that look pretty good to you? Maybe it's just a little bit too far down. Okay, let me pull it up and we'll try that again. The first time I was trying to do this, I was trying to use my fingers and they kept getting in the way of my seeing. But these little needle nose tweezers here work really well. That looks good. Alright, I'm going to call that OK. Click OK. Now the machine is recognizing that mark. Now it is telling me to do not remove the embroidery positioning marks. Please rehoop the material so the next pattern and the centers of the two embroidery positioning marks are within the embroidery area. So what I'll need to do now is take my hoop out of the machine, place it on my work surface again, and rehoop it according to where those positioning stickers are. So let's go do that. Now remember, what are we doing? We're holding the hoop by the hoop as we move. So don't touch anything on that screen yet. Let's take the hoop out of the machine and go to our work surface. So let's see. This is where that next design is going to go. I find it helpful to put that template back down so I can see how big it is and use the hoop grid, and I can tell that my design is definitely well out of the stitching field. This big box right here that's on your hoop grid is the stitching field. Everything inside of that area is where a design will stitch. It's not going to stitch outside of it. So I can look at that design and say, it's outside the area. So we definitely, just like the machine told me, need to rehoop. So I'm going to take the fabric out of the hoop. That's scary, isn't it? But oh, this is so cool. So let's take it out. Now here's my design template again. So I can make sure that when I am putting it back in the hoop, I'm not worried about it being straight or even or anything like that. I'm just worried that I have it within my stitching field. So yep, that looks like that's pretty good. So we will put this hoop back in here because the machine is going to read those stickers and it will be able to tell me exactly where to put the design. Or rather, it will be able to tell itself exactly where to put the design. So everything looks nice and snug, and we're ready to go back to the machine again. Now we are ready to press the scan button that was on the screen that we left. And it's going to recognize it. And the hoop's going to move, so make sure nothing's in the way once again. How about that? That little brain got to work, and it now tells me that the embroidery positioning marks are recognized. Remove the embroidery positioning marks and embroider the pattern. So we'll peel those off. And I'm going to save them for later. And click OK. And there we are, all ready to go. So I'm just going to trust that this is in the right place. Lower my presser foot and we'll get started. Now once again, we'll be taking the hoop out of the machine, trimming that cutting line, trimming the excess fabric away, putting it back in the machine, doing the narrow zigzag, and then finishing it with the satin stitch. So let's get busy and get that accomplished. All right, let's check our work. That looks pretty good, doesn't it? Connected it like a dream. Now what if you need to put another one on there? I know I don't have enough stabilizer for another one, but I want to show you one more thing with this, because you can keep using your camera function, and that is really kind of nice, especially if you are second guessing your machine, and that will allow you to look at the design placement really close. So let's just continue. It says embroidery is finished, okay to connect the next pattern, and yes, let's do one more. So we'll press OK. And we'll just keep pressing OK while it does its thing. I have to go get that design again. That's the one. Set it and press my connect tool. And now it's connected it exactly where I need it to be. And you know, if you didn't want it there, you know, I said before you can move it. You can also use these tools here to move it. But we want it to be right there at the end. So I'll press OK and it will tell me again that the carriage will move. And it's going to recognize it so that I can put these little stickers back in place. All right, now I have another one in place, and now it is time to take the hoop out of the machine again and rehoop the fabric. So I'm going to go do that exactly as I did before, as you watched previously. Okay, I'm going to have to add another piece of stabilizer here, so I'm just going to overlap it to make sure that I've got stabilizer in the hoop. I'm going to overlap both pieces. This time I'm going to pull this piece all the way to the edge to make sure I don't miss it. Okay, I'm going to loosen my hoop screw so that I can easily get this border in the hoop. The thickness of the thread there will make it a little bit harder to hoop than it did the first time. So loosen that screw so it's easier to do. There you go, that looks good. So I want to make sure that none of my pieces of stabilizer are going to flop up and down. And this little bit is kind of worrying me right here. As the machine moves and as it is taking a picture of it, that stabilizer might be finding itself in the wrong place. So I'm going to use a very expensive little tool here and just tape it in place. There you go. That's going to keep it right where it needs to be. All right, now I'm ready to go back to the machine and put the hoop back in and let it do its thing. All right, we're all set up and ready to go again. So let's press scan one more time. Make sure you're out of the way of the hoop. It's going to recognize those stickers. All right, now it tells me that the positioning marks are recognized and I can remove them and embroider the pattern. So I'm going to press OK. But, however, let me go ahead and take those stickers off. What if you are afraid that maybe you didn't get the stickers placed good enough, or maybe you just don't trust that little computer in there and you want to see what's going on your screen? At this point, you can go ahead and press the camera function and take a picture of what's in the screen and see how that design looks lined up with the previous design. So you can see what it looks like. Look at there, that looks pretty good, doesn't it? You can even blow it up, as you've already learned during this challenge, to make it bigger so you can see it even closer. And you can tell there that that is perfectly aligned exactly where it needs to be. Isn't that a relief? Awesome. Okay, we'll press OK, and then we're ready to sew again. So let's check our work. Pop that out of the hoop. Let's look at that pretty border. Oh my goodness, look how perfectly that is connected. That is awesome. I love this feature on the Baby Locks Destiny 2. That is making me so happy because I am quite a picky stitcher and I really like things to be perfect, and that is perfect. That was pretty amazing, wasn't it? Don't you just love how the Destiny 2 makes connecting borders so simple, and the projects that you can make? I can't wait to see what you do with the border design. You can join me on my blog at abitofstitch.com, and I'll walk you through this project again with pictures that you can see and even print out. And you can also find the link to download the designs. So enjoy your destiny, because I know I sure am enjoying mine.